Welcome back, Legion. Today I'd love to have a chat to you guys about deload weeks and what a deload week is and how you can benefit from taking a deload week. So first thing is we should probably establish what is a deload week and what do I mean by a deload week. So it's essentially just a week of training where load and intensity is going to be reduced. You can also categorize volume into this. So for example, if we're doing our strength work and you're doing, say you're just in general doing 3 sets of 10 with 70 kilos on something, a deload from that might be 2 sets of 8 at 60 kilos. So we've changed the volume from 30 total reps to 16 total reps. And we've changed the intensity from 70 kilos to 60 kilos. And then you might just do that over your whole program. I think the important part to recognize here is that a deload week is not stopping training at all. In fact, it's the opposite. You still need to continue training. It's just a week where you're just doing a little bit of reduced training. So why is it important to take a deload week? It's going to help you recover and add this little physiological response called supercompensation. So supercompensation is when you've built up a certain training stimulus, so you've built up a training load, and then you take a small break in that high intensity volume and you've pulled back down, hence a deload week. You get this super compensation in performance. So you get this kind of like peak back up to where like you kind of build, deload, and then super compensate. That's what it would look like on a training spectrum, but what actually happens is the harder you train, the more fatigued you're actually becoming. So there's going to be a point where you either hit too much fatigue and now you start to detrain, because you're now maybe running into symptoms of like overtraining where you're really tired, your performance is significantly dropping off, maybe you're getting sick, etc., etc. That's too far. So this is where if we periodically plan for a deload, is you can build, increase that fatigue, add in the deload week so you come back from that fatigue and you start to recover and rejuvenate. The following next block is your super compensation block. You've now recovered and refreshed from the previous block, and now your performance is going to go up that little bit in the next block. And essentially you just rinse and repeat. You do the same thing where you build, increase the fatigue, have a deload, and then super compensate and build. And that's kind of like how we improve our performance over a long period of time. So when should you deload? So it probably depends on the whole program and the whole planning process, whether it's, if it's an Olympic cycle, it's a process of 4 years. If it's a seasonal cycle, it's a process of maybe 10 to 11 months. But essentially, you want to probably deload every 4 to 7 weeks. So where you're doing maybe a 3-week ramp in your training, where you kind of like build, and then that 4th week is the deload week. And then you go again, build. You can do it over 7 weeks, where maybe you do 6 weeks in a row, and then that 7th week you deload, and then you go again. You can do it really for any stretch of period of time, to be honest. You could train for 12 weeks in a row and then deload in the 13th week. But it probably just depends more on your capabilities, the goals of your current training cycle, and I guess your ability to recover. It's probably going to be different for like elite versus semi-professional versus amateur. I would say the more external work that you're doing, so for example, if you're an amateur player, like you're probably full-time working or full-time studying. So those external life factors definitely play a big part in your ability to recover from your training. So you might need to deload more often. If you're an elite athlete, you might be able to stretch it out a little bit further because your job is essentially just to train. So you might not need a deload as often as an amateur or a semi-professional player. This is where a coach really comes in handy. they can either pre-plan it as a part of your training cycle, or they can just determine based off some of the feedback that you give them as an athlete. I guess what you would just want to avoid is like, what if you don't take a deload week, is that you potentially run the risk of overtraining. So as I alluded to before, that training actually causes fatigue, and the idea is to generate this fatigue because it's important, and then take that deload week, recover, and then super compensate. Now, if you don't take that deload week at the appropriate time, yes, you could delve into something like overtraining. Some people believe this isn't a thing, but there is such thing as overtraining, and it's probably more from the perspective of not planning your deloads or your recovery in well enough, and you just lead into this kind of almost de-training phase. And like I said, some of the symptoms of this would be excessive fatigue, you're not recovering very well in between your training sessions, your performance in your training session is actually significantly reduced, you might be getting sick, and you might be getting all these other signs and symptoms, and then hopefully you want to avoid this, but potentially you're also running the risk of being injured. So this is where the deload actually becomes really important, because it almost becomes one of the best injury mitigators that you could actually do. You just have to be careful. Again, I'm going to reiterate that a deload week is not taking a week off from training. This is something completely different. A deload week is just reducing your load, intensity, and volume to help you recover from your previous block of training, super compensate, and become a better athlete. All right, thanks for that, guys.